Thank you for joining us today. Today's session is about the multiple brain integration coaching and how the latest findings in neurosciences are changing the game. We're discussing the latest findings in neurosciences and the way that the three functioning brains in our head, heart, and gut work respectively. I'm very excited and thankful with Dr. Jay Chandra and Jenny Karan for the opportunity to share this information with you in what we call multiple brain integration techniques. And what is probably extremely exciting is that modern neurosciences today is starting to recognize and prove that what ancient tradition have been saying for the last 2,500–3,000 years. And for those of you new to this program, this session is to help you become aware of just how powerful these new findings of neurosciences are, and actually making available to you this new coaching technique. The other application of this would be about what it means when a client is coming to you and say things like, I want to do this, but my head is saying one thing, my heart is saying something else, and my gut wants to do something else altogether differently. So as a professional coach, what do you do now? Probably up until recently, we would have just thought of this expression as just little cliches, like little terms and colloquial things that people typically say in a conversation. But modern neurosciences is showing us that there are not just trivial statements, they are clear indication that something is somatically happening in the body. What people are saying is what they head want to do and what the hearts want to do in a different way, and the gut as well to do something else. So there is a very good reason why they are saying that, and they show up in modern ancient tradition when you hear a great advice or like follow your heart or trust your gut intuition, or what it means to come from a place of compassionate way of being in the world. Why do so many wisdom traditions say these kind of things? And why is so common across so many different traditions? As modern neuroscience is showing, there is a reason for this. And we do really appreciate is that the heart and the gut are legitimate brains. What neuroscience is saying is that we don't have just one brain, but we have three brains. And it's not just one in our head, but the heart is technically a legitimate brain as well as the gut. And as the head, they are two complex adaptive neural networks. As neural networks, they can process and store information, they store memories, and they have their own neuroplasticity. They learn and adapt, and each of them are incredibly powerful organisms of learning and adaptation. So what neurosciences is calling, the head is calling cephalic brain, the heart is called cardiac brain, and the gut is called enteric brain. We usually just call them head, heart, and gut brains just to make the things a bit easier and understandable. But what makes a brain a brain? It's important to understand that we are not calling the head and the gut and the heart brains, but science is calling them for a very technical reason. So let's see a little bit about the neural structure of this different form of adaptive neural network and why they are technically brains. They are considered to be brains by the various fields of science that deal with the specific organs. So the head brain is, the heart brain is neurocardiology, and the gut brain field is called neurogastroenterology. There are scientists working in these fields, and they label this complex adaptive neural network as brains because they have all the hallmarks of a brain. They are equivalent to what we have in the head brain. So they have not only a large number of neurons, as first thing, of course, a brain needs a large number of neurons, but they also they support circuitry that is required, like the glial cells and other componentry that you will find in the head brain. And all of the neurotransmitters that you find in the head brain are found in the heart and the gut as well. And what affects the head brain is also affecting the heart and the gut brain. So for instance, like certain disease like Alzheimer is not affecting just the neural network in the head brain, but it's also affecting the gut brain. So it's very powerful to appreciate that when a client comes to you and they are wrestling with a particular decision issue or life issues, or they try to set goals for themselves, whether they are professional goals or personal goals, they work with a lot of internal issues within themselves, and how to make a proper decision on how to sort through a plan, or how you just clarify their thoughts. They are probably going to be wrestling with all the information, and all the information signals are coming from all the three brains. The head brain try to rationalize, the heart brain try to figure out what is important, and where the passion is, what has to do with values, or which values are in play. And the gut brain is try to appreciate, or and try to do things, making sure that these things are safe. So what to act upon and what not to act upon. And often these signals can be contradictory or can be really conflicting if the three brains don't know how to work and be aligned together. And this is what a good multiple brain coach does. Grant Susolo and Marvin Oka started to look at what would it mean to be able to get these three brains integrated, aligned and in communication with each other, so that the person is not only internally congruent, but internally aligned within themselves. But also what happened where they are. They discovered that when these three brains are aligned, people are not just internally congruent, but something else happened. They start to come alive. It's like their whole relationship to themselves, to their life, start to blossom and get to a level of what is called emergence. Something emerged within themselves that was not predictable at the start of a particular coaching session. And so we found a good multiple brain integration coach, or mBIT coach as we call them, a good trained mBIT coach, works with three brains with the client. They help the client to get in contact and communication with the signals from each of these three brains, so that they can pay attention not only to the head processing, but the heart and the gut intuition. And as we know from science, they are really actual intuition, real signals coming from the heart and the gut intelligences. And then to get all these signals aligned so that the person is internally congruent and start to come alive. Now you will hear me during this webinar to use different terms to call the brain. Sometimes I call the brain, sometimes I call them intelligences, sometimes I call them neural networks. Really, I interchange the way I define them. And sometimes I call these brains because, of depending really on different people that we are dealing with, our different clients. We find that different people, different clients, they come to a coaching session, we respond to these terms in a very different way. Sometimes you may be able to talk about the three brains, and some clients will find that interesting and very fascinating, and it will capture their attention. For other people, they may be confused if you call your heart and your gut a brain. So if you call them instead intelligence, their heart intelligence, the gut intelligence, for some reason they are happy with that. And other people as well, they are be more technical oriented. They will appreciate it more if you call them neural networks. So we use the terms really interchangeably. And for those of you listening, when you will going to refer to your head, heart, and gut brain with your clients, you will change the terms as appropriate to what your clients is responding to. Two very important things that we need to define very quickly is the way we use the terminology. So for instance, the title of the book that Grant and Marvin wrote is about mbraining, where the M is for multiple and the mbraining is the verb form of brain. How do your multiple brain work together as a process? The way that someone's currently is using their multiple brains. For example, if a client comes to you for a session and they are saying that, they are having a lot of internal challenges, they cannot find the passion in life or the purpose in life they want, or they are wrestling with a complex decision and their head is saying rationally, I should be doing something here, but the heart really wants to feel what is important. There's something else there. And the gut is too afraid or want to do something else altogether differently. So we are saying that that's the way they are currently doing their mbraining processing. As a good coach, our first step is going to do a bit of diagnostic and to see how they are currently using the three brains in a way that produce a non-resourceful state, or in a better terms, their issue or the problem state of their current situation they want to deal with in the coaching session. We try to find out why they are not able to solve the problem for themselves within the three brains that are not working together. And then we will let them to get the three brains working together, align and integrate all these multiple brains based on what it is they are looking after. So how we do that? Well, this is what we call mBIT, the multiple brain integration technique. There is a whole suite of techniques that Grant and Marvin develop on how to help people to get the three brains alive, get them in communication with each other, and get in alignment. And they deliberately call these techniques. Grant and Marvin didn't want to create just some sort of philosophical approach or just like a generic methodology, but to hold themselves accountable after looking at all this sciences research to turn that in a practical, really learnable, workable, and doable techniques that people can actually use to make a difference in their life. I want to show you from where a lot of this coming from. And Grant and Marvin actually did quite a bit of extensive research on this. Just to give you an indication of the huge amount of research they did, they pulled over in excess of thousands of paper, graphs, articles across webs and across the research journals. But where they really started with this process was getting neuroscientists to inform the process of behavior modeling, looking for patterns and processes that underline the behaviors that people are able to perform repeatedly and work out what the process recipe is. Typically in the past, behavior modeling has been done without the neuroscientists informing the space. So the first thing that they did was to go to neurosciences and look for what was the evidence across literature, looking biological and development evidence, evolutionary biology, and ethic evidence. They also look at surgical evidence. For example, if you look at something like the head brain, the history from a scientific perspective, or what was going on in the head before we had functional MRI and PIT, where they give us the possibility to look inside the brain while it's operating, while we are awake and alive. Psychology and science initially look for pathology and disease evidence and surgical evidence. So if somebody has a stroke or somebody has been in a car accident and had, for example, their frontal lobes injury, they look at what the deficit and change in their behaviors and their psychology and their personality. So what Grant and Marvin did was to look for pathology evidence and surgical evidence of the gut and the heart. And for example, gastric banding, that is an operation that perform gastric banding to help people to control their weight and control the weight loss. There is actually a lot of studies that are being done of people where gastric banding and of whom they have personality change that are occurring in these people. So it's all including also cognitive linguistic evidence and neuro-linguistic evidence. They went modeling and looking at the science wisdom evidence, ancient wisdom evidence, esoteric field evidence. So all that together produced a wide range of factors. And through common factor analysis of all this information, they determined that what were the core competencies for each of these networks, what were the prime function, and how did this behavior play out in human excellence and human experience. And as said, a lot of comes from science-based evidence, but also at the same time, as we said earlier, science is showing and confirming what wisdom tradition has been saying for 3,500 years. And I suspect there is going to be many of our listeners today that have some kind of sort of background with wisdom tradition. You maybe practice maybe various forms of meditation, some form of yoga. Many coaches could be familiar with the concept of Enneagram or breathing practices. And it's amazing how many of these wisdom traditions have reference to three souls or three forms of intelligence and not just one. Grant and Marvin started to analyze what are these forms that are reversed, and seems to have very high correlation to the head, heart, and gut neural networks. So they combine a range of things from wisdom tradition to what neuroscience is saying. Grant and Marvin did active research with groups. They pulled together people and tested their ideas through techniques and, and theories to see what was working. They look at behavioral modeling cases where they were asking, okay, who could do that and why? And they look, for example, or occurring in a conscious processing to find out what the correlation are to the heart and gut. They look at a lot of different case study of neurophysiology and functional disorders, and they started to see there was a lot of information that they started to cohere on some very clear patterns. And I really would like now to highlight some of these patterns. Sorry, what some of these patterns, like a first set of powerful distinctions that began to uncover was that not only we have a different neural networks in our head, heart and gut, but they are really actually like modified brains. Also, these brains do different things, experience life in different ways. So because they do things differently, that's explain why a lot of your clients and my clients, or maybe even ourselves personally, sometimes in our life we have internal conflict between our head, heart, and gut. This is because they are trying to do different things, and if they are doing that and they are not aligned to each other, and they are going to have internal incongruities. But when they are aligned, there is a whole level of personal empowerment that start to arise, and new quality of being that start to rise as well. So first, let's explore what these functions are, and to do that, let's have a sense of this, and let's just have a look at some of the common sayings that people are using in the normal linguistic, whether they refer to the head, the heart, or the gut. So let's look at this. What are some things that people typically say, some sort of terminology and some ways of phrasing language that people use? If you're looking at these type of phrases, there are phrases that are referring to what kind of internal processing is happening. So if someone say, I was not using his or her head, what do they mean by that? We know intuitively that this kind of phrase does not mean that the person was not connecting to their feelings. Or, when they say, where's your head at? They're not asking you what your deep set of values are. They ask you what your thoughts are. They ask you what your logic is. If we say someone lost his head or her head, we are not saying, that they were disconnected from their feelings. We are saying that they have lost their rational thought. And so it's really interesting because when we look at the covert phrases or what people use around the head brain, it gives us a lot of clues on what internal processing is actually going on for people. And in context now, let's see what are the common saying people are using around the heart. So what people say when they refer to the heart in their language. Well, these are some of the things that we are saying, and by no means is a comprehensive list, it's just a list. And if we took a look at this kind of phrases, they refer to other kind of processing. They're very different in context to the head. So if someone say, have a heart, or wear a heart on the sleeves, or they have a broken heart, we don't mean that logic is irrational. We are saying that it's something about feelings. It's about emotions. So when somebody has a heart-and-heart conversation with you, they're not asking you or say that let's talk and have a logical conversation. They are saying let's have an emotional connecting together. And this is not just in the Western country, but across cultures. We find a very common thing that when people are referring to the head or referring to the heart, they are referring to a very different processing. And you can pick it up in this kind of sort of things with your clients as well. When your clients come in and start using an head-based language or a heart-based language, their language is directly representing the kind of internal processing they are wrestling with or dealing with. And as a coach, you should give you some very big clues on how you need to work with them. Okay? And now in contrast to this too, let's see also what the expression around the gut are. And what do people say whenever they refer to the gut in their language? Now, we need to clarify that the gut is not just the stomach. It's an entire gastrointestinal tract, up to your mouth and way down to the anus. We are going to find a whole range of language patterns that are referring to every part of the whole system. So people often say things like, I have a gut instinct on this, or go with your gut. What they mean when they say that? Well, there are some other clues. When people say things like, you need to have guts to do this, he's saying you have got to have what? You have got to have the courage to act. You have to got the capacity to overcome fear to act anyway. Or when they say something like, I cannot stomach this, it's hard to swallow. What they are saying that there are certain things that I cannot digest. I can take this into me. It's hard for me to actually make this thing part of myself. But all this is giving us clues, or as what the gut intelligence does, what the brain is particularly good at. When people saying things like, I've got butterfly in the stomach, they refer to fear. So why does fear and anxiety get processed in the stomach? What is the stomach does with all of that? And we will start exploring this and what we mean with this in talking about the primary functions. This is one of the set of distinctions that began to really come up very clearly, the combination of what science is saying and the behavioral modeling of what people typically are saying and do. And also it's actually research that Grant and Marvin found that each of these different brains are good at different things. So the head obviously is good at cognition. It can recognize things into awareness, could perceive things, and is good at thinking, processing. It's good at problem solving, analyzing, decision making. Well, decision making is a bit quite complex process, but in decision making, it's a good at analysis, emphasizing, sorting things out, organizing them. It's also good at making meaning. The language centers are in the head brain. And so it's very good to come out with stories and with a narrative. So for coaches who are listening, if you work with things like narrative therapy or using cognitive behavioral therapy or things of that nature, you're good at helping people to make a better use of the language centers they use in order to actually create a storyline, a narrative that works better for them. And that will challenge of course, the dysfunctional stories that the mind and the head brain create. And the heart is very different. The heart is good at your emoting process or multi-processing your emotions. The heart is where we actually processing our emotions. A classic example of this is behavioral modeling, is that if I go to someone anywhere, doesn't matter which part of in the world, which culture of the world, and I say, if you deeply feel something, when you have a deep set of feelings about someone, or if you really care about someone, or you're passionate about something, deeply passionate, your deep set of emotion, please point where in your body you feel it. And everybody point to either some aspect of the torso or the chest area. That is where in the body happen the processing of the deep emotions. And it makes sense because a lot of our internal network in the heart is in the chest area and is where it's happening. It's also responsible for your values and value processing. And so this is where the heart intelligence, the emotional intelligence come into play in good decision making. Meaning that if you try to make a decision and you are not connected to your heart intelligence, that means you're not connecting to what is important to you about the decision. So how you can really, you cannot appreciate your process for valuing something. So how do you make a really decision based on priorities, on what is truly important for you if you're not connecting to your heart? If it's over your head can make a meaning of anything. And it does, it will make you think about anything. It will make you think about nothing. And of that nothing, that will make a meaning of that and make you believe about that. So if you're on the left side of your head can rationalize anything. It's really amazing. A quite fascinating discovery, for instance, of research is about what happens when people can get creative in their head, but not connecting to their heart. And where problems start to happen. A research that came out from the field of behavioral economics and was based on the checking of the behaviors that people do around prosocial emotion. and whether or not people will be honest or dishonest. And during the research, it's been found that as soon as the subject has been asked to do any sort of cognitive-based process, whether they were doing like a logical problem or just adding up some numbers or doing mathematical problems, that increased the amount of the dishonest behavior and decreased the amount of prosocial behavior. People really actually were less likely to be kind and considerate to others, and were more likely to even get to the point of stealing money from the experimenters in the experiment protocols. And this just by getting people to the head base first rather than the heart base first. So if the heart and gut are not aligned and not working together, the head can make meaning of anything and come out with a storyline to justify that anything. And we see that in today's corporate business, and all the sort of decisions they come up with. And if you really look at it, you will really admit that clearly some of them decisions are not really ethical. Sometimes are really moral, if not even illegal. There are times when we start to see all sorts of decisions or action being made. And if those decisions will have not been made really connecting to the core values of connecting really to people, what we call really rational effects, with your relational effects, the feeling of how much you appreciate a relationship. If all these are not there guiding the decision, guiding the story that their heads are coming up with, their head can justify practically, basically, any behavior. And this takes us down to the gut. This is particularly good in preserving your core identity. Now, what is interesting is that about 80% or plus of your immune system is managed by the gut neural network. And what is the neural network has to do is to figure out what is you and what is not you. And to what is not you, the neural network system will send antibodies to get rid of it. It's also good at self-preservation. Fears, boundaries, protection, safety issues are related to the gut. So this is why we feel anxiety and fear in the stomach. As well, you get the butterfly in the stomach, or the gut instinct that saves people when they are in danger situation. Martial artists, for instance, they train in the gut, they really follow the low body, a low belly. The gut is also about mobilization. Your gut is particularly good at getting you into action. So when someone is frozen with fear, that is a gut response that can stop you from doing stuff. But it's also the gut that gets you and pushes you into action. So, and again, we hear this in the language, in the sentences that people use, and help you as a coach to understand which kind of processing is happening inside them. So someone needs the guts to take action. So they need to have an interest, really an intestinal fortitude to act. So these three brains directly clarify a lot of clients' issues that may be showing up in your coaching session. You just know very clearly what is when they say something like, my head say I should do something, which is thinking, making meaning kind of type of an issue. But my heart really wants to do something else. That is emotional values. And my gut is too scared to act. Self-preservation, mobilization. Or, it's like, it's not me. I'm not sure if I'm capable to do that. All these sort of gut identity issues. So we start to see why a client may be having a lot of internal challenges and what needs to happen, where you need to address the particular issues, and with which intelligence. And that's why you cannot analyze from the head your way to a purpose or passion in life, because that's a heart-based intelligence. You're not going to think your way to your passion or your sense of purpose. And your head is not going to convince your gut to not to go in action when your gut is in fear mode or in self-preservation mode. The gut has to feel more secure before different storyline will start to appear for your client. Now, why cannot just the clients get aligned by themselves? There's some, why they need your coach as a coach. Well, it seems there are some kind of constraints sometimes that happen. And there are some common ways which would prevent the three brains from integrating. And as a coach, you need to check this because it's kind of what you need to work with in a coaching session. So we have a first example. What can happen is that one or two of the intelligences are used, and one or two of the others don't have a voice in a decision. And we see this in a lot. Again, as I mentioned before, for those of you who are executive coaches or business coaches, many times the business coach is run by a head-gut type of relationship. The gut has the instinct on what it wants to do, want to act, and the head come out with all the sort of story to support the gut. Act or not act, and often the heart doesn't have a voice in some kind of these decisions. So when this happens, you will see organization, for instance, with the majority of executive decision are missing the heart element in that decision. And that will have all sorts of create all sorts of problems in the organization itself, ranging from engagement, cultural problems, communication problems, all the sort of leadership problems as well. Sometimes we find that one or two of the intelligence just simply override the others. The difference between the first one and this one, number two, is number one or two intelligence just don't have a voice. They don't even show up in a decision or action. But in this one, number two, what happened is that a voice, there is a voice, but it gets overridden by something else. And so, for instance, the heart is saying, I really want to do this in my life. And the head says something like, shut up, that's not you, that is totally silly, that doesn't make any sense. And your gut will say something like, be quiet, we'll do this instead. So the voice gets overridden when that happens. Sometimes we also find that intelligence is used inappropriately to do the job of another one. I use the example to say, when someone started the coaching session and ask as a coach, I say, what do you want to talk to me about today, or what's going on? And they start saying, I think I'm feeling. I think I'm feeling. Thinking about the head, feeling is about the heart. So this is the typical case of this, when one of the intelligence is used to do the job of another one. So we see this also like in emotional eating, for instance. Someone is feeling emotionally unfulfilled. So therefore they show up in their behaviors as overeating. And what happens is that the gut is now trying to make a person emotionally feel better, but the gut doesn't process the emotion. The gut can get satisfied by having enough food, but this food doesn't fulfill the emotional requirement of the person. Sometimes they work together in the wrong sequence, and I will explain about this component a bit later in a few minutes. And this is basically about the constraints. Early in the research, Grant and Marvey realized that they could come up with a lot of range of techniques, a whole range of different multiple brain integration techniques. But people, and especially coaches, need a map, like a sort of roadmap to apply these techniques and take the clients through this integration. So how exactly do work with the client with the three brains? Well, Marvin and Grant put together what is called the mBIT roadmap and show the steps of working with the clients when they come to you with an issue and they cannot resolve for themselves. And it seems to be arising from some sort of internal conflict between our head, heart, and gut. One of the first things that has to happen is that you have got to help your clients to get all these brains in communication starting from the bottom. They get in communication with the three brains regarding the decision and plan issues they are working on. Then you need to work with the client to have them align, internally congruent within themselves. When they are internally congruent, we can currently find that we can help the client become more authentic in the expression of who they are in the world. Now, they are internally aligned. How do actually they express themselves? In the highest form of who they are and their way of being, in an ontological way of being coached. And we find that the higher expression show up in a set of patterns that we call higher expression of creativity, compassion, and courage. We could use different words for those who are listening, but Grant and Marvin choose this for a very specific reason. Many years ago, Grant was reading a book about making some research about the Bonpo religion, that is a religion that took an expanded Buddhism in Tibet. And what he really he read was they were saying that in a person could really ever been considered to truly live a wise life if they had mastered three things. And these three things were compassion, creativity, and courage. And then when Grant and Mami were doing all the research and doing all the common factor analysis of the three brains, looking for which were the core competencies, the function of each of the three brains, they found something that was actually very like a flow state, very positive and very adaptive in the way the three neural networks can work. And within those, looking at each of the three brains, one thing that really come up is what is the most adaptive of this each brain in what they do. Is they do this going through like a mapping across a wisdom tradition. And what wisdom tradition was saying, they found that there were compassion, creativity, and courage. And at that point, Grant, remember what you read many years before, that more than 3,000 years ago, the Bonpo religion has been talking about compassion in the heart, creativity in the head, and courage in the gut. And that is the sequence, and that sequence counts. So we start to see these words again in different form, but sometimes they are the very exact words showing up again across many wisdom traditions, and how they're showing up even in business literature. Leaders that actually come from a state of compassion and compassion organization actually are far more productive than those who are purely cash-driven. And also the need for creativity, the need for courage. And we are using these words in a very specific way. For instance, by creativity, we don't mean lateral thinking. We don't mean innovation. We literally mean the capacity to create, to actually come from a place of nothing to create a something into the world. And also to have compassion, which means more than just feeling for someone else. Compassion requires compassionate acts. We need to see a sense of service, a sense of being able to serve and help the needs of others. And of course, courage as the capacity of act despite conditioning, despite the social constraint that, to keep the status quo. And this becomes really the structure of a great leadership. And one of the reasons why higher expression are an expression of self is that they require each other to do what they do. Compassion is not creative. It will be down compassion without creativity. You can actually make things worse by just simply rescuing or saving things rather than helping people learn, helping them grow. That is the more compassionate things you can do that is intelligent. No compassion ever got expressed, or nothing compassionate ever really happened without courage. Creativity requires compassion. If you're not connecting to people, your creativity is not of service, then you could end up with a very innovative cheater system, doing some cheat and steal creatively. Similarly, if creativity is not manifested in the world through courage, where then nothing got created. And once you get courage, you can have dumb courage as well. You can have smart courage. Courage requires creativity and an intelligent form of courage, a courage that is compassionate and courage together, that does something in the world that makes the world better for compassion, for self-compassion for others. But courageous enough, to get past any conditioning, for not just succumbing to the status quo if the status quo is not satisfactory. We will find that where people are coming from the higher expression of authentic way of being, an emergent sense of wisdom starts to arise. The wisdom that also is also seen when you work with clients. You will find that when you do multiple brain integration work with your clients, the wisdom with which they come up with, compared to the original challenge issue, is 90%, if more, more of the time, dramatically different than when originally the starting coaching session. Because the problem stays, the conscious problem that they are coming to your coaching session with come from a consciousness of not integration. That arises from not integration of the three brains. When the three brains are aligned, they are coming from the higher expression. And often the original problem can be totally irrelevant. And they confirm that to you. Saying things like, now I know what is really true for myself. That the really thing is actually this, not the thing I originally come to you with. They end up with outcomes that is so totally unpredictable. So I guess this is where we start to see the emergent wisdom, the element that come into play. So the art expression of the three brains are so critical, and you find them out. You will find them in your clients. When your clients come to you, and they're often going to wrestling with some sort of compassion in the heart or for themselves, they're beating themselves up, they're judging themselves, or whatever it would be. All they need to have is a sense of connection with others in order to serve. They need to get creative about it. They need to have a sense of courage about how to actually succumb to their self-limiting beliefs, limiting conditioning, whatever it may be. So this is a very big leverage point. And we find with executive coaching that leadership executives are constantly wrestling with these forms of things. Many organizations are not socially entrepreneurial because they are not hard connected. And if they were connected, they would be more socially entrepreneurial. When we actually care, our leadership comes from a sense of compassion building. Let me connect with my clients, with my customers, connecting to the community I serve. Let me connect to the people that are in my organization. Let me be more compassionate. Things like really, when you start asking questions like, which are the needs of the people that are working in my organization? Where can I work and serve? Of course, this will be more social entrepreneurial. It will not just go for a bottom line profit. And it's not all about total shareholders return. It's about really, in better terms, what Richard Branson would say, doing good in the world. And doing good in the world is good for business. And if you read Richard Branson's books, Screw the Business as Usual, it's all about social entrepreneurial, global social entrepreneurialism. And it's all starts from exactly this, the higher expression, such compassion in the heart, connecting to people, and then be creative as a leader. Envision new possibility on how to express that compassion in the world, and then have the courage to challenge the status quo and act upon your conviction, act upon what is true for you. And this is going to happen for your clients as well. Where is the personal problem in the relationship? They need to have compassion, self-compassion for themselves and for others. Be creative in how they want to approach the situation. Having the courage to overcome their limited conditioning, and and take them to a higher form of real, authentic way to express themselves in a relationship, in parenting, in business, in any situation, whatever it may be. We talked about before that we need a specific sequence, and we get it in a moment, because first of all is we need to explain this very quickly, because it's very difficult for your clients to actually get in contact with their three brains and get them aligned if they are in a state of autonomic imbalance. This is a really detailed diagram. It's all about the autonomic nervous system. The autonomic nervous system is automatic. It drives all the functional that you normally don't have conscious awareness on. You don't have to think about. It has two arms, and these two arms are the sympathetic and parasympathetic. For the sympathetic, you can think about stress. So it's the high energy that gets you moving whenever there is a stress, or it's the high, the fight and flight response. But when they're going, the danger is gone. The parasympathetic system, which is the rest and response, or the feeding and fornicating part of the system, brings you back in balance. They are separate systems, but they're typically working counterbalance. But they don't always have to. And you can get a situation where you are either parasympathetic dominant, sympathetic dominant, or beautiful imbalance, or what is called coherence between the two arms. Or you can get a state where you're both sympathetic and parasympathetic are engaged, like the accelerator of a car and the brake of the car that you're using at the same time. And this create a state that is called metastable state. And require a big work on for you as a coach if there is a particular situation. So this is actually very critical. If your clients come to you, they're overly sympathetic or stressed state, or it will be very difficult for them to tap in their heart and gut intuition. Their story will be running fast, and if they are overly parasympathetic, they will come in sort of depression, like apathy, lethargy. And, they're having like a gravity day, and it's very difficult for them to get in touch with their heart and gut intuition. They're very, very heavy. So we need to get them in an easier state to balance and take them to a higher congruent state. Well, how we do that? But this is kind of interesting. The research is showing that the heart is actually responsible for maintaining that balance. But there is a first challenge. If it's on an arm of the autonomic system that is outside our awareness and is running autonomously, and the heart is responsible for that, how do we work with that? What we do with that? Unfortunately, there is a very simple technique that you could teach your clients that help you get into autonomic balance and then help them to tap in their heart and get intuition aligned. And believe it or not, is as simple as the diaphragmatic breathing. And it's breathing. A lot of the research is showing that a simple process of regulating your inhalation and exhalation, and more specifically, roughly a cycle of about 6 seconds in and 6 seconds out, done repeatedly, keeping the inhalation and exhalation, we start put someone into a state of autonomic balance, literally within 60 seconds. Really 60 seconds. So we do this now in our coaching certification. We put people into a biofeedback machine where they can actually see what is called a heart rate variability. And we could teach people to actually go from a state of stress or depression, not clinical depression, obviously, but a state of stress, anxiety, or slight depression, and move them to a state of autonomic balance, literally inside 60 seconds. Once they know the breathing technique, what happens when you breathe in a particular way, you can actually stimulate the autonomic nervous system, stress or depress, to get into balance. And it's interesting enough that all wisdom tradition throughout the last 3,000 years, they have some form of breathing practice, whether it's something explicit like pranayama breathing, method of yoga, or like in other philosophy, they have more things like chanting, mantras. They start to regulate the the breathing patterns. Now, we saw this before, our mBIT roadmap. And so the first step of moving up the roadmap is really getting your client in autonomic balance. Teaching them a very simple breathing technique, the power of putting a client into breathing patterns, and then in autonomic balance, starting the coaching session make a world of difference for you and for the clients as well in the result that they will achieve. If you try to coach a client through a stress state or a depressed state, it will be way too hard. The first step is to get them into autonomic balance, and then we can move up the roadmap. And as we mentioned before, there is an order in which we work with our brains, and it's not starting from the head. And borrow from a traditional Chinese medicine, a great phrase says that the heart is the emperor. So we start working with our clients through the heart. Let's first get connected to what's true for them in the heart. The sequence in which your clients works with the 3 brains, the way you work with your clients' 3 brains can make all the difference in the world. And closing this short webinar, I want to share with you a phrase by Steve Jobs. If you look at what he's saying in this language pattern, is already referring to the as the heart and the gut really are sticking up from the head. He's also already saying in the last line they are an intelligence into themselves. And when you tap into them, an authentic way of being starts to emerge. This is what he's trying to get out of that on this quote. And again, neurosciences is proving what many of us intuitively know. But now we have so much more precision, and it's showing what ancient tradition has been saying for over 3,500 years. And it's really a beautiful thing. And, we live in a great moment when modern neurosciences are confirming worldwide what spiritual tradition has been saying. So an implication of us as professional coaches are just profound. Quickly, some information for you guys, for whoever is interested in coming in our mBIT coaching certification. The coaching will be in Bengaluru from the 20th to the 23rd of January 2018. The venue is the Chancery. The cost in show on this slide. For any registration, anything that is related to registering, payments, request, location, please contact Dr. Jay Chander. That's his number on the slide, and his email address. For anything else about the course, the content of the course, anything that is related to mBraining itself, you can contact me directly at my address that you see on the slide, or I would suggest you to check our main website, that is mbraining.com, where you get a lot of more information. There's a lot of free value things that you can download, like interviews and some exercises that will be very helpful. And basically that's it. And I really hope that this has been of value for you, and give you some different perspective and stimulate a deeper interest in understanding how, in becoming an mBIT certified coach. Because really, I can share that with you. In my practice, I'm an NLP trainer as well. I'm a master trainer and mBraining master trainer and coach. What really changed my game as a coach has been when I discovered mBraining. That made a lot of sense, and if you think about the concept of neuro-linguistic programming, NLP, linguistic programming in neuro, now we know that we have 3 brains. So we cannot just not considering the other 2 brains, the heart and the gut, because they are really, and the way they are connected to the autonomic nervous system, because the autonomic nervous system and the balance, how that is balanced between the parasympathetic and the sympathetic, is what really drive the bus, if I can say that. It's really the importance of every moment in our life, there will be personal life or professional lives, we live in a state that could be parasympathetic or parasympathetic, unbalanced or balanced. What mBraining will give you and will give your clients will be the tool and the ability to put and live as much as you can balance with the system balance. And of course, when that happens, you will live your life expressing the higher expression of who you are in the world. And that will really change anything in your life, from your relationship, from your work, from anything. So really, the learning from me of mBraining has been absolutely phenomenal and profound. The results that I've been having all over the world with clients of any kind of race and paths, from corporate coaches, CEOs to housewives, students, has been just phenomenal. And I really looking forward for you guys to be part of this training. As I say, for information, just keep in touch, and look forward to hear from you very soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.